unbelievable. I feel like home, to be honest. So I was spending like most of February here in Kiev, and it was really interesting for me because I got to learn many people, and it was really, really incredible time for me. So thank you so much for having me back. And also, actually, thank you so much for people behind the scenes. You know, they all make this happen, and they're wonderful girls and guys just walking around, making the invisible work. And so huge applause to them, please, for all this incredible stuff that they built up. Thank you so much. Now, okay, this is going to be a long journey. If you know me, you know that I have a lot of stuff to cover. So I have no idea how we're going to get through this, but let's do this. Now, what is this all about? Well, I've been working a lot in different areas for quite a bit of time. It was interesting for me to explore how many things that tend to be invisible for us tend to raise serious concerns, especially when it comes to interface design. So we're going to look into many different things that kind of make up an experience, and most of these things, hopefully, will not be the things that you already know, but things that you don't know yet, right? But before that, I want this thing, because it's like, I feel like in the family, like this is all a family reunion for me, I want it to be special and memorable, and this is where we'll need your help. Now, you have some balloons around here, okay? Now, I have to ask you, who knows how to tie a balloon? Okay, who does not know how to tie a balloon? That's okay, it's a safe place. I have a tutorial prepared, just in case. However, because it's all about balloons, there is a warning caution. Hold on. This is a session that is not in any way as being considered and thought by KRUPA team. So whatever happens, it's all on you. So KRUPA does not take any liability for the nightmares, headaches, or injuries caused through this session. That goes, of course, for the balloons, but it also will go for some of the wonderful examples that you will not be able to forget later. Okay? So with this in mind, for those people who do know how to tie balloons, a little repetition. First, you take a balloon. That's a very simple thing. You stretch it, okay? Then you start blowing into it. Feel free to follow the instructions. If you have a balloon, it's a good idea to test your skills, because even obvious things are not necessarily obvious. Come on, let's do this together. So you're making some progress here. That's great. Now finally, at some point, you reach that point where it's a little bit too much. Don't go there, okay? You know, not too much, just not too much, okay? And then you pinch, okay? Everybody's with me? You're not very kind of, you know, come on, let's do this, right? And then you do the magical trick, the magical trick.
The game begins in 3,
So we have like 30 seconds to blow up 2. So let's do this. This is how it works. And I want this to be memorable, so when you come back next year, you'll remember this was the conference when you blew up the balloons. So let's do 2. Okay? Are we there yet? Okay, so I have to ask you one more thing. So who has a phobia against balloons? Sorry? No. Oh, that was close. So anybody has a phobia against balloons? No. I'm very sorry. And this is the best I can give you. Now comes the magical part. Are you ready? So let's all together, on the count of 3, stand up and throw the balloons as high as we possibly can. Can we do that? Oh, on 3! Don't do that! No, on 3. Do we have photographers here? Ready? Okay, so 1, 2, 2.5, and 3! case, I do not take any caution. Like, so whenever these balloons will fly out and, you know, whatever happens, it's all on you. Now, let's stop it. We can play later. We can play later. We need to get back to our senses and explore the challenges from the dark corners of the web. And specifically, when it comes to the dark corners, we kind of need to understand the world in which we're living in. And that means that we need to kind of look and explore what is the world that we're living in specifically. So if we look on outside and we look about, you know, into think, come on, stop it. And we look into things like how we're interacting with this, because this is everywhere, right? We'll find out that it's actually a really complicated world in which we're living in. So we have 7.6 billion people, that's a lot of people, right? We have 5.6 billion people, which is an addressable market, and 3.5 billion of them is essentially using active smartphones. That's a lot of people that we can address using our phones, right? And using our websites and applications. Now, 25% of these people are going to use Apple, 75% of these people are going to use an Android, right? However, if you look into what kind of device they're going to use, and you will see shortly why it's so important for designers, so please do not fall asleep yet, we'll find out that many of them will be using Moto G4. How many of you have Moto G4? I thought so. Some of them are actually using Nokia S1. Anybody using Nokia S1? I thought so. And also Alcatel One. Anybody using Alcatel One? Because you're designers, huh? Right? Now these phones are actually really, really cheap. So if you look into these phones, which are dominating phones in Southeast Asia and also in South America, they are their top bestsellers in 2018, right? But you probably haven't even heard of them. What's interesting about these phones is that they're all very bad phones. They really are. But you know, if you look into all these phones, they're just 12 to 15 times slower than an iPhone 7, but they're also 15 times cheaper. That's kind of fair, I would say, right? But if you look into the experiences that people have while using one of these phones, using all the wonderful, beautiful applications, design-driven applications that we're designing so carefully today, we'll find out that most of the time is waiting. I hope that you will not be able to recognize these brands, right? But it takes sometimes up to 25 to 35 seconds to click on a button and see something happening, right? Which is why when we're designing interfaces today, we can't just think about pixels. Pixels, you know, we got that. So you need to design a beautiful carousel, or a beautiful accordion, a beautiful table. You know, you're designers, you will get that, right? However, at this point, we really have to think twice about how our interfaces should adapt based on device memory. How should they adapt based on network conditions? How should they adapt based on, you know, whatever conditions the person finds themselves in? And that's really, really tough. And of course we think that, you know, everything is getting better, the internet connection is getting better, and we have 4G and 5G coming up, and it's true, that's true. However, at the same time, the quality of the connection is getting worse. Mostly, you know, because we're using more and more data every year. But despite all of that, we have these curves coming in, right? Transition curves, where mobile wins everywhere. So what does it mean for us as designers? Oh, here we go. Well, it means we really have to study this phone. I mean, not specifically this phone, but a phone. Because if I ask you now, you know, how much time do you spend with this beautiful piece of technology? When you wake up in a lovely Saturday morning, how many of you would glare outside of the window to see the glaring sun first, before doing anything else? And how many would look into their notifications coming all the way from Instagram and Facebook and maybe Tinder and everything else? How much time? That's not fair. How much time passes between you wake up and you looking at your phone? 5 seconds? Or you're sleeping with your phone? That happens sometimes as well. Well, the thing is, most people spend approximately 3 hours a day on mobile. That means, however, that they also spend quite a bit of time looking at the phone and putting it from the pocket. Because if you think about it, 80 times a day, we do this movement when we have the phone in the pocket, we pull it from the pocket, look at it, and pull it back. 80 times a day. Now, how much time do you sleep on a given day? 8 hours? Well, it depends on the country. If you happen to be in France, you sleep more. If you happen to be in South Korea, you sleep less, right? But on average, 8.3 hours, which means that every 12 minutes of our existence, we do this. And we put it back. Every 12 minutes of our existence. And if we look into the interactions that are happening on that phone, more than half of them are 30 seconds or less, and more than 40% are less than 15 seconds. And remember the phone that I showed in the beginning, the way it takes 25 to 35 seconds to do anything? The very first thing we do when we start working on a mobile project is setting up UX budgets. How much time can we afford for the user on an average phone to waste looking at our screen, right? Because most of the time their expectations will be 30 seconds or less. Now, how much time does the user need to sign up for your application and go through onboarding and complete the first task? Whatever that is, setting up an account, let's say. 30 seconds? A minute? This is something that we need to measure. Another thing we need to measure is how this beautiful device works. This is a beautiful piece of technology that's highly underrated these days. Many times when I think about interface design, I think about a thumb-driven design. Because most interactions on mobile are happening with a thumb, or also the index finger. If we look into the specifics of a thumb, we'll find out that some areas are more accessible than the others, right? We also tend to use different pressure. It depends if you're male or female, for example. But we tend to use also different posture. And these are the officially classified postures that we're using. And in a few minutes, you'll see how it actually reflects on our interfaces, right? But these are the common postures that we have. Now, you might have a bridge in your house, or like near your house. Imagine a river, right? And you're crossing that bridge. And if you want to test your relationship, the best thing you can do is to ask the person that's important to you to reply to an email or look up something on Google while crossing that bridge. And what you do is you observe them looking at how what posture they adapt to answer that email. Because they're a different kind of people. Now, what posture would you adapt? You have to cross the bridge. It's a very tiny bridge, right? So you have a pretty expensive phone, don't forget that. When I look at you, you don't have Alcatel. You have a pretty decent phone. So if you have to cross, who would adapt this one? Holding the device with two hands. A few people. Okay, what about something like this? One hand. Look around, you have more in common than you think. Okay? What about this? That's risky crowd, all right? What about this one? That would be just weird. I mean, we're mostly using two hands landscape when we're watching a video, let's say, or when we're, playing a game. This is very uncommon. Now, what's interesting, these people don't like risks, they're committed. Just saying. These people are more casual, and these people are just, let's not talk about that. So it's really important because if you really study how people interact with the phone, you'll find out that many things are really, really critical. For example, one of them is nobody hits our targets. However beautiful our icons are, nobody is going to hit them. Out of this test, and I don't know about this guy specifically, right? But what's interesting is that not even one single person out of 35 people here actually hit the center of that icon. So we have to be really forgiving when we're designing those interfaces, especially because an average finger width is approximately 11 millimeters. So our hit targets should be bigger than that to accommodate for those taps. And when people spend the time on the phone, they usually look through the center of the phone. They usually look and tap and click everywhere in the center. It's really rare that we look at the very top or at the very bottom, which means that for us as designers, we have three primary areas where we can design around. The main content will be living, of course, in the center. The second most important area would be at the bottom, and the third most important would be at the top, right? And these are the priorities we have to design around. And to design around that, it's not just enough to have a hunch and call it a day, because usually our hit targets are way too small, because the space on this precious phone of ours is really, small. We can't put a lot of stuff in there. So this is why many people tend to work with accuracy dots. Anybody uses them as well? Some people, okay? So the idea being, well, if you actually plug around your interface. You print it out or you just have it on the screen, and you accommodate this little touch template, right? When you realize that the further away your icons or your hit targets are from the center, the bigger the padding around them should be. And then in the usability test, for example, before you start going in it, you make sure that the hit targets are good enough or big enough, so you place it on top, and then you realize, you can actually discover if those targets are big enough or not. And this is what we tend to do when we actually start working as well. Because we tend to work in terms of components anyway, so by doing that, we can break everything into small little parts. And the very first thing we do is we buy a lot of boards, and we put all these components on them. And so prototyping looks pretty much like this. Put a component from here, and from there, and from here, and from there, mobile and desktop, and then you put them together, right? And then we place that accuracy dot on it to see if it's actually good enough or not. And this is really, really fast when it comes to actual work, right? So this is what it actually will look like, right? And of course, it's all grouped and classified and so on and so forth. Okay? So just to sum up here, essentially what it means is phones are getting cheaper, they're not getting better, right? Mobile interactions are very short but numerous. We know that many people use index finger or the thumb, and we know that input is always imprecise. So when it comes to navigation, for example, we should probably make a really good judgment finding out what to do and what not to do. Now we know, for example, that all of a sudden, that hamburger icon that used to be floating in the right upper corner somewhere and left upper corner somewhere, right, where it's really inaccessible for the thumb, started moving around, with material design actually dropping it to the bottom. But we see a lot of these bottom bars showing up for websites. That's a little bit surprising, right? And especially the main reason for it is actually quite obvious, because, you know, it's more accessible for the thumb. And so we'll find out it, you know, everywhere really. It doesn't matter where you look. The most important part being is, it is just more accessible for the thumb. And it also means exposing important items right away. Probably the weirdest thing I've seen in my life is many websites on desktop hiding all the menu behind the hamburger icon, making all these navigation options inaccessible. Now, if you hide something and put it in the closet, you should not be expecting more people coming to it, right? So for example, here on the La Cité de Vin in Bordeaux, they expose the tickets button prominently at the bottom rather than actually showing up somewhere in the navigation at the top. We will also see this kind of museums, for example, having this hamburger icon now positioned in the center, in the middle, at the bottom, where it is again more accessible for the thumb. And sometimes you even find these risky examples. Like this is a really bold statement from New York Times. Like 90% of the front page is empty, and you have just a little navigation icon at the bottom. And in fact, many applications are kind of operating in terms of designing from bottom to top rather than from top to bottom. One example for that would be something like ADA. ADA is a medical application to track medical intake. Like if you have symptoms, for example, you can track them as well. And the design is all around accessibility, of course, so this is what it looks like. The first half of the screen is empty, because why would you put something in there? It's not accessible for the thumb anyway, right? And at the same time, you have the logo and the branding and the call to action and the navigation and the logo as well, everything at the bottom of the screen, right? Which is again, of course, more accessible for the thumb. Now, the interface per se is a little bit weird just because you have this lot of empty space between the breadcrumbs at the top and the navigation, but it's still, you know, it's better for the thumb. And I think it's very important that every time we click somewhere, that the next interaction is really, really close. And you know, this is exactly what happens here. Whenever you click anywhere, the next interaction is always very close. And sometimes you find breadcrumbs at the bottom. And of course, sometimes you find all the sticky, you know, buttons like add to cart, next, continue, and so on and so forth. Shopping cart, not at the top, but now at the bottom, right? Which is again something that we're probably should be getting used to at this point. But of course, we know that hamburger icon is, you know, it's not really hamburger, is it? Which one would you prefer? There is a family of hamburger icons. Would you like Oreos, or kebab, or maybe stairs, or maybe a cake? You know, there are all these options, or maybe fries. And probably my favorite one, the cheeseburger in the middle, right? You know, you have all these options. And there is no real consistency. But you know, whenever we run tests, we realize one thing. It doesn't matter what icon you choose. they're all relatives of each other anyway. People actually understand what it means. Although it would be a bit more obvious, especially if you have, let's say, an older audience coming to your site, to replace it with the menu button, right? But one thing that is really important if you study off-canvas pattern are some issues that are always there, always there. So I show this example all the time, but I think it's really, really critical. So if you look into Star Wars, right, on the left, and Star Wars is, it's a good old off-canvas. You click on a button, things show up, the navigation drawer shows up, like many interfaces are like that. Do you find any problems with this interface at all? And so you feel more comfortable in answering my questions. I brought some chocolates. Who wants a chocolate? Anybody else? Just a second, I'll get back to you in a second. Oh wow, this is going to be difficult. I wasn't expecting this stage to be so big. Okay, I don't take responsibility, I'm just saying. Okay, ready? Oh wow. Not bad at all, huh? Anybody else? Oh, but we need to also have people on there and on there. Oh wow. Get ready. Okay, that wasn't good. I mean, the music is totally like, I'm not a rock star or something. Okay, this I can do. Okay, just one more. No. Okay, just one more. Close enough. Come on, let's work, people. So it's not fun here. So, what are the problems here? Oh, right, everybody forgotten about that already. Well, the problem is, you open the drawer, you do not see what you tap because, your finger is still there. And many people, by intuition, will be hitting again, and they'll be landing in the land of login and sign up, right? And one little thing that's really annoying for people, because some of them are actually used to this scenario, to this fact, you tap on an icon, you tap again to close it, to close the drawer. And sometimes this experience is a bit different, right? And if we look into how you can do it a bit better, the interaction that you do should prompt the next interaction, but at the same time, the distance, the physical distance on the phone between you clicking somewhere and you clicking somewhere again should be as minimal as possible. So the only difference here, on the second example, is actually, hold on, you click, you open, you can close at the same spot. And sometimes, just a little trick that could work, if you can, actually push that hamburger icon a little bit further down, that would be again a little bit better for the thumb as well. But very often it's not the case at all. Because very often we click on an icon, right, because it's down here, and then, everything actually works fairly well. So you click and it opens, and then you actually click and it closes. However, because sometimes we even put this icon, use this icon on larger screens as well, you end up with this kind of strange thing, right? You click on that icon, but then to close it, you actually need to move your finger or move your mouse. If you can minimize that effort, that actually can be better, right? Another thing that I just don't understand, if you have only 2 or 3 icons or elements in the navigation, rather than hiding them behind the hamburger icon to make a design cleaner, it's better to just show them because you should be expecting more traffic coming their way. And it also sometimes depends on the context, of course. So, you can't just say navigation is always the same. Depending, if it's a Arabic website, let's say in Arabic or in English. Here we have this photo at the top, and then the navigation and the photo change depending on the country, based, of course, on the culture in which you live. So I don't know if you actually saw it. Did you see a difference? Yes, so of course the woman is going to look in a different spot, but you can also pay attention to something else. Yes, pay attention to the drink. Come on, just go already. But if you go to Arabic, it's going to be a little bit different, right? So the navigation sometimes might really need to adjust based on, what you have. And sometimes you don't have to use a hamburger icon. Like if you're dealing with a pasta website, a restaurant that's, Italian restaurant, that's actually fully dedicated to spaghetti and pasta, why on earth would you include a hamburger icon if you can do something else? And so here, as we go smaller, you can use the spaghetti icon. There is nothing wrong with spaghetti icon, right? And I think that this is actually pretty cool. And so every time we design around navigation, we try to figure out what priorities we have. We're exposing the most important and critical button or actions. We never hide something that's really, really important. You know, sometimes we have this experience where you slide from one level of navigation to the first, to the second, to the third, to the fourth, to the fifth. And in my experience, not even a single person actually expects to find something on level 4 or 5. So maybe it's better to replace it with search instead. If you do have like something very important, you better place it on the top, on the bottom, right? Always keep the close button on the same spot where you open the drawer, and please do not hide navigation on desktop. Very often people use it as anchors just to understand what the website has to offer, right? So when we talk about navigation, we try to avoid friction, try to make things very obvious and very clear. And I think at some time, we actually might be better off introducing some friction. Now, if I ask you how you feel about this design, I'm pretty confident that some of you will think that this is a bit weird, a little bit too much, a little bit, you know, weird, and you know, not everybody can afford it, and of course that's true, right? However, when we were running tests, we found out that people really like this navigation, right? They have this huge menu button that's almost impossible to miss, right? You have this accordion, which is also quite impossible to miss. So at this point, you might think this is just out of proportion and strange and weird. It performed beautifully in usability tests. Or here, right? Again, instead of hiding navigation behind a hamburger icon, why don't you just expose it? What's wrong about navigation? If it's kind of a part of your story that you want to tell, maybe it's a good idea to include it, right? And sometimes you can, you know, go ahead and risk something different. So this is especially interesting for this site, which is Chlebazavod 9, which is kind of cute. But essentially it's a space which has different stores and shopping malls and so on. And the navigation is just a big bottom bar at the bottom. It's fully accessible, it's close to the thumb, it doesn't have to be a hamburger icon living somewhere in the top left or top right. You can do whatever you want, in fact. And in fact, sometimes we can go and experiment. So, Tijuana Flats is a chain of restaurants in the US. And there are approximately 18 or 19 of them in the US. Now, this is what they look like. This might not be your style. This might not be your thing, but this is not so important because, you know, this is them, right? And so this is how it looks like inside. So these are the people in the restaurant. And these are the ceilings, you know, the walls. And these are really huge walls. And so what they do is every now and again, they hire a graffiti artist, you know, for all the 19 stores across the US. And they continue the story that they started, you know, a while back, like 4 months ago or so. That's a very expensive endeavor, all right? But this is important to them. Now, the menu should probably reflect the personality, and it does. Again, you might not like it, but you would agree probably that it kind of fits in with their story. And of course, their website has to reflect this story as well. So this is their website. Right? So you might say, well, this is just no. So who thinks that this is a bad design? So who is afraid to say that this is a bad design? Okay. Who thinks that this is a great design? Oh, way more people. Now, whenever somebody asks you this question, you should punch them in the face. Why? Because it's the most horrible question you could ask. What does it mean? Design is not here to belong to museums or so. We're not putting it on the wall somewhere. It's here to, you know, to support a purpose or to kind of support a function, right? And it works really well for them. Well, for a while. Then they made a redesign. Welcome to the world of Tijuana Flats. Beautifully designed as a machine, I guess. Well, look at this carousel. Isn't it a beautiful carousel? And look at the social media buttons. Aren't they wonderful social media buttons? And a joystick that doesn't do anything, but it's still cool. Right? And apparently it doesn't do anything because you have to donate first. Right? Because you have to put money in the slot, which makes sense. And if you feel uncomfortable with the design, you can turn it off. Well, that's fine, right? Well, then you can, of course, turn it on and then continue. And of course, you might think, so how would you make this beast responsive? This is just ridiculous and it's difficult and kind of confusing and all of that. Well, if you want to make it responsive, you can. You don't have to adapt the same layout. It's a little bit different, right? Unfortunately, all these blobs do not work, so, you know. I really miss Flash. Anybody misses Flash? Yes, my Flash people. Yes, wonderful, right? And then, you know, if you go actually even smaller, right? And how often does it happen to you that you go to a website and you go, today? Not that often, right? So in the spirit of everything we know about web design and the best practices that everybody preaches, and performance and web fonts and textures and all of that, they decided to do a Big Bang redesign. And the Big Bang redesign moved from this to this. That's it, really. And I think that there was a lot lost between the previous design and this design. And no company knows it better than Bloomberg, who hired a bunch of designers who were given the freedom to do whatever they want. Guess what? They did whatever they wanted, right? So if I ask you again if it's a good design or not, you probably will say, no. Well, it actually served its purpose again, because they sold all the tickets 2 months ahead of time compared to the previous year. So it's a beautiful piece of design. It's probably the best they've ever created, right? And at the same time, if you go to this, which is one of the most popular features that they created, it's still the most popular feature, and it's actually going and taking every single rule from the textbook that we're used to and breaking it. Essentially, mostly for the sake of breaking it. It's all fully accessible, but again, this is like what we saw from the VIX team just recently, just in the previous talk. Everything is a little bit weird. I mean, you would not create that, right? And of course, this is kind of breaking things for the sake of breaking, introducing friction at the point, you know, just to raise some awareness about something. And they keep doing that. This is like the one from 2 weeks ago, right? They really like marquee. I mean, marquee is so hipster these days. Actually, it looks like everybody is using marquee at this point, which is probably not necessarily the best thing, but this is kind of an attempt to introduce some friction. But you don't have to go overboard, right? Because actually creating these examples, or designing these examples, or even design like rebranding of Dropbox, you might think that this is horrible. It's really hard to do. Because we've kind of forgotten how to create something that stands out, because it really has to stand out, right? We're used to kind of this generic design, and it's really hard to break out of this. And I really like these examples where things are just a little bit different. You know, you can choose if you want to go to a restaurant with like first-class experience, and then you have all this white blanket and all of that, or maybe you want to have a little bit of a fucked-up experience, right? We don't do a lot of fucked up experience these days, but this is one of them. Everything is just a little bit off. It's beautiful, right? It's accessible, it's everything, it's fast, it's everything you want. In the same way, like, you know, look at this restaurant website. There is nothing like broken here, it's just a little bit weird. Like imagine going to a restaurant again and having like a little cook singing in front of you. That's a bit weird, but you don't necessarily hate it. Just that character that they have, right? So sometimes having some sort of friction actually might be a good idea, right? And for that, you don't need to go that overboard. Just a little bit of friction. So here, for example, if we look at this example, right? The only thing that they decided to do for this website I'm going to show next is introducing this kind of pencil-alike or paintbrush-alike signature everywhere. So you go on any websites that belong to the network, the only thing that's different, that makes it different, is that little paintbrush. That's enough, you don't need much more than that. Or you can forget about rectangles and circles. There are so many organic shapes we can use, right? Just pick any shape you like. So for example, for every single kind of project that they have here, they just introduce a different shape, right? That's all, that's also enough in order to stand out a little bit, right? So there are many options for things we could do. I mean, many of you will remember this, I'm sure, right? Aww. And you know, I was typing and retyping and typing again, and getting friction at the point where you might think, you know, signing in, you should not be serious and it should be obvious and all of that. But maybe, sometimes it's actually a good idea to make people think a little bit, just a little bit, so they actually remember what you've done, right? And so this is actually a very, very cool thing. And at the same time, you know, this was the second edition. It's not as cool as the previous one, but it's still nice. Right? And for example, you can explore those areas where things usually are very, very boring. Like if you have a loading indicator, that's a loading indicator, right? Or you can think about like making something that's really, really extremely boring and make it a bit more interesting. Like, what can be more boring in the world than a radio button? right? What can be more boring in the entire world? You can make it interesting. So maybe you should make people, click twice or 3 times or 4 times to sign up. What's wrong about that, right? This is very, very memorable. Right? And so we can always play a little bit. So whenever you want to make a case, even if you're in a corporate environment, we always do AZ testing. So you always, of course, will be improving the buttons and the icons and all of that. But at the same time, it's also important to improve the actual experience around the entire site. So we always test one design against a very different design, right? And then if the last one succeeds, then we actually continue working on that. So we can make users think a little to capture attention with just a little bit of work. It doesn't require too much work, right? And it also is important that your style is evolving and that you do all this experimentation, but you do need to solve a real problem. You can't just do it for the sake of it, right? And so you do need to explore and to be able to explore. I have no idea how I'm doing on time. 10 minutes? Really? Well, I don't know what to do now. Okay. Well, because it's dark, I need to go all the way. You want to go all the way dark or like lightish? Well, it's on you, I told you. Now I have to jump. Okay. Just a second. Yeah, because one thing that I've been spending quite a bit of time recently is the notion of privacy. And it's been remarkable to see how many issues are kind of showing up when you actually start asking people about privacy. Now, how comes that we're living in the world where this is normal? You go to read somewhere, you might be even getting a download an app kind of thing at the top as well. And then you have to sign up and you have the cookie consent and then all this pop-up showing up right in your face and we just accept it. We're used to it at this point. And if you look into something like mundane tasks, like a really boring task, you want to buy a ticket to go to a cinema, right? In Madrid. First you get the pop-up, thank you very much. You want to give them money, get a pop-up, get a second pop-up, which doesn't work. With the close button, you can click, which opens in a new tab. And you go back because you think it must be a mistake. And then it opens in a new tab again, right? Isn't that nice, right? And then you have this experience, and if you do want to pay money, this is like all the text you have to read with a wonderful button at the bottom that you can click. That's nice, right? But please check the film, date, session, and the information shown above is the one you have selected for your movie tickets. You will not be able to make changes or refunds once the purchase is finished. Thank you very much, right? And then you think, I really want to buy a yacht or a boat, right? And of course, everybody does that online every now and again. That's not surprising. So you go on this beautiful site and, sorry for the quality, and you get the video and it's like magical. You're willing and you're ready to spend €1 million on that boat. So you configure, you select the preset that you want to buy, and what they give you as a result is half a carousel, not even full, half a carousel, and then 2 hamburger icons, and then, you can flip through, of course, and you think, this is interesting, right? And you kind of start, okay, must be a mistake. And then you click around, and then you realize, you're a designer, you know that. You realize, hide summary, right. Oh, yes. Oh, then it appears again, right? And this is the moment when you are willing to spend €1 million on something, right? And they give you radio buttons and stuff like that. And I showed this example last year, but I think it's so critical. Somebody thought that this is a good idea. So this is the form for an insurance company. We have to, have your own plan, right? And so what they ask you is, do you have children? And at some point in their career, a professional designer sat down, looked up at the form, thought, slider, right? Must be a slider, right? But this is actually very sad. This is really, really sad because how come that these interfaces show up? This is not okay, right? And in fact, a slider has a property. It has a minimum value. It kind of has a maximum value as well, right? So luckily, they're quite, nice people designing this because you can have at most 5. That's, for many people it will be good enough. But if you happen to have 6 or 7, there is a way out for you, right? Because you can click on the pencil icon And then this turns in the input field, and you can type in 7. However, the interface will tell you, 5. Right? Now, this is wonderful. How often do you see that, right? And then it goes on and on. Like, for example, this beautiful piece of technology. Oh, I have to warn you, if you do not like insects, please close your eyes now. This is not going to be nice, right? And then somebody thought, yeah, this is perfect. So if you happen to have insects in your house, right, you can go ahead and, go here to Doom. And the best part is I can almost imagine a designer, a little bit of red splatter in here. Just a little bit, just a little bit, right? And let's have a configurator. And a configurator will have a slider on the thumb, because why not, right? How often do you get that? This is incredible. A slider, right? And then you select where you have all the invasion coming in, and then in the end, as a result, you get, boom, here's your solution. The problem is, they have exactly one product in the shop, but still fine, right? And so we're kind of getting used to it, and all of this stuff that I'm not even talking about, like all this shame-appealing things, like my medic would like to send a notification, no thank you, I do not want to stay alive, right? And it's everywhere. And when I was talking to students, when I was teaching in Amsterdam, like in February, they're so depressed because of the web. They don't trust the web. They don't like the web. And I'm wondering, so we're designing all these beautiful experiences, but as a result, we end up with this. Because somebody thinks that this is a good idea, right? And then you get all these notifications as well, right? It's really everywhere. Like the entire internet is actually really toxic in a way. And there are this really strange conversations happening at this point. Because if you think about lawyers, think about doctors, right? They need a license in order to be doctors and lawyers. And so some people think, is it a good time, because we have such an enormous impact on people, to introduce licenses for designers and developers? Right? Because, everybody can do this, but it might affect a significant amount of people, right, in the world. So this is an interesting conversation to have. And no wonder that we're fighting back. So, once this started showing up, YouTube serving ads that are using your CPU to do crypto mining, isn't that nice? Right? And of course we started fighting back. And so when I started looking into people and how they actually interact and how they see the web, this is really, really frustrating. So these are all the wonderful components that surround us everywhere. We have pop-ups and push notifications at all glory. Chat window pop-ups. Right? Where you can actually talk to somebody. Download the app, importing context and all of that. And what do? Pop-ups, instant block. All the time. Push notifications block all the time. Chat windows pop-up block most of the time. Download the app banner at the top, block. Importing context so they can spam people on your behalf, block. Video autoplay, block. Permission requests to get access to anything, block. GDPR cookie consent, okay. Oh, we don't care about, cookies, whatever. That's okay, that's fine. Advertising, block. Onboarding. The most demanded feature in every single onboarding is the wonderful, glorious skip link, right? People don't like onboarding that much. Access to camera and photos block, access to location block, email newsletters, depends. So if I look at you now, let's say you are, somewhere in the public Wi-Fi, like an airport, and you're connecting to a Wi-Fi, and they ask you to sign in with Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, SMS, or email. How many of you would actually choose Instagram, WhatsApp, or Facebook to sign in? Not that many, I thought so. Why? We don't want to let them, whoever that is, in our public, private, digital space, right? That's number one. SMS, some people prefer SMS, but most people prefer email. But, now that I look at you, if they ask you for your email, you have an email for this kind of stuff, don't you? Right? You have one of those email addresses. They have a lot, like messages in that email inbox have many friends. Spam, accounts, like discount codes and all of that. Stuff that you never really use or need, right? And so, sometimes we'll be actually providing a correct one, but only if we really feel comfortable with it. The same goes for social sign-in. Right? And then, of course, there is a good old friend of ours. CAPTCHA. Well, most of the time the new CAPTCHA is okay because it's invisible, but CAPTCHA is a beautiful piece of technology, but it actually does the job. And then I hear this all the time. I have nothing to hide, that's not a problem. Cookie is fine, I have nothing to hide. Well, the problem is it's not about having something to hide, right? It's more about having this sense of intimacy with somebody, like sharing a moment, a message, a text, just with that person, right? This is what it is about. It's not about, I have nothing to hide, so whatever they want to have from me, I'll give them, right? I want to have something that really only I and that other person has. That's very important to me. And in fact, if you look, there are so many really problematic issues that show up. And I don't have time to go through them. I have time to go through them, maybe, right? There are many of them. People just don't have trust. Like every time you hear freemium, this is probably the worst you can do when you call a plan freemium. People don't trust freemium. They think that there will be a lot of weird stuff happening without your consent. People really don't like a couple of things, but the most critical one is exposing their search history or browsing history. That's a very personal thing. People really don't want anything of that to leak. But of course, access to Instagram and all of that is important as well. So we've been fighting. We've been fighting against all these pop-ups, although this is a very nice one. It's probably a very good example of a really nice pop-up from Medium. But then we know how to deal with it. And I was surprised how many people actually use all those things. AdBlock Plus or Ghostery and Facebook Container and Stop Chat pop-ups and recently a new innovation in the world of bloggers. I don't care about cookies, right? I don't know how often you are seeing cookies, right? But this is a real thing. And we just need to be a little bit more respectful, right? For example, sometimes you don't need to know all the data that we're requiring from the user. For example, whenever it comes to the actual age prompt, you access Carlsberg, for example, or any kind of beverage website, they will ask you for how old you are, right? And so here, they are not going to ask you too much because birthday is a very sensitive private thing. But if you ask somebody about the month, only if you need the month, you don't have to ask for the day. And the person can just enter the site. So if you're old enough, then you'll be entering just by typing in the month. You don't need to ask for the day specifically, right? And so this is like one of those little details. You can ask only what's needed, but not more. Because you don't need more most of the time. Because usually you either need a day and the month to send somebody, let's say, a coupon code, right? Or you need to know if they're over 18 or not, right? And that's it. The same goes for things like, age or gender, right? Very often we think that everything is binary. We have so many assumptions that everything is just, yes or no. But very often it's not the case at all, because people have that very different sense of privacy. So you need to always provide a way out. So the reality is really rarely a set of straightforward binary choices. For example, one thing you can do when it comes to gender is provide an option other, where somebody can specify what they want to be. Maybe they want to be a happy emoji, so let them. There is nothing wrong with that. Or maybe they just don't want to share this data, right? It's all very fair, right? And at the same time, one more thing that's really interesting that's kind of started showing up recently, of course, it is beautiful, amazing, wonderful privacy reminders because of GDPR, right? So, who is at least one person in this room? I need like 5 more minutes, max. 2, 3, 4. Okay. So is there at least one person who read a privacy policy in their life? At least once? Some people? Wow, I'm very proud. I'm very proud. Most people do not. Do you know that? So, and that's really surprising because if you look into it, there are so many shady practices going on, right? So on WhatsApp, whenever you install WhatsApp, you can just seamlessly agree and that's it. But there's of course a little thing at the bottom, read more about the key updates to our terms and privacy policy, and you click on it, and that checkbox show up where you can unselect it because they gather all the data about you, right? This is nice. But then if you actually start reading privacy policy, and this is what I've been doing for the last 2 months, I'm not joking by the way, that's very sad, I know. You'll find many interesting things. For example, there is a F-Secure Wi-Fi hotspot, and it has a HERP clause. You think I'm joking? I'm not joking. And you agree to assign your firstborn child to us for the duration of eternity. Isn't that friendly of them, right? So you sign up for a Wi-Fi hotspot somewhere in a public airport or so. You sign up your firstborn child. That's nice. But F-Secure has confirmed that they will not enforce the clause. But actually, legally, they are able to do that, right? And you go here to GameStation, has a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful policy, and they say, you agree to grant us a non-transferable option to claim for now and forevermore your immortal soul. Oh, by the way, I deeply apologize for translators. This is not going to be easy for you. Should we wish to exercise this option, you agree to surrender your immortal soul and any claim you may have on it within 5 working days of receiving written notification from us or one of our duly authorized minions. Right? Now, how many of you are using Amazon Web Services or working on a product that uses Amazon Web Services? Now, have you read Amazon Web Services policy? That's a fantastic reading material. It really is. So if you look into Amazon, they have many, 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 many products. One of them is Amazon Lumberyard, which is an engine for game development, and they have a lot of games with zombies and all of that. So if you look into the service terms, you'll find out a little clause, which is a zombie apocalypse clause. Sorry about the thing at the top. This restriction will not apply in the event of the occurrence of a widespread viral infection transmitted via bites or contact with bodily fluids that causes human corpses to human corpses to reanimate and seek to consume living human flesh, blood, brain, or nerve tissue, and is likely to result in the fall of organized civilization. That's a fantastic reading material. It's like a detective for you right there, right? And it's really interesting because these terms ban game engine from use for anything life or safety critical except in the event of reanimated human corpses. That I would say is good to know, right? But then sometimes you also find these cute ones, right? This is one from Tumblr, and there's little summaries which are really kind of cute. Like, be proud of who you are. You're beautiful. We're looking you in the eyes and telling you how beautiful you are. Interesting. So I highly encourage you to read. It's like, just pick one every day. It will be fine. It will be a lot of fun. But there's a lot of really bad stuff happening as well. I'm almost finished, I promise. So like, for example, when Google Chrome was released, essentially every time you type in something on Google, every time you upload an image, every time you write text, the data doesn't belong to you anymore. They changed it, but it gives Google a perpetual revocable right to do whatever they want with your data. Anybody uses Instagram? I said I'm not taking responsibility for what happens next. On Instagram, whenever you upload an image, you give them the right to use it in any way they like. For example, if they want to use it for an advertising or a banner or print or anything, they don't even have to ask you for permission. And of course, they will not even pay you. That's obvious. The same goes for Twitter. You give them full license to do whatever they want, and they even say in the privacy policy, no compensation will be paid to you, and you will not even be informed. Anybody uses Tinder? Oh, okay, this is a very private question, I'm sorry. So Tinder collects all the data, but they're so hungry for data, they even get information about accelerometers and gyroscopes and compasses, essentially looking into how do you tilt your phone, right? That's quite personal, I would say. Now, luckily there is services, so for example, terms of service didn't read, which highlights all of that stuff, so at least you're aware of what happens with your data. And so if you look at the state of privacy, right, your location is always tracked, even if you don't like it or don't allow it. You own copyright, but you transfer full rights for use to third parties. These services can use data in any way they like. Their affiliates can use this data in any way they like. Their affiliates of affiliates can use the data in any way they like, right? Usually, whenever your account is deleted, the data is stored, so they keep information about deleted searches, and services know more about you, most of the time, than friends and family. So it's really about time to strike back, because there are beautiful, beautiful stuff, like things happening. People really care about being very clear and transparent about privacy, and fighting against all these things. And it wouldn't surprise me, actually, if maybe 5 or 7 years from now, we're actually getting to this wave of beautiful, ethical, respectful interfaces, and all this crap, all these horrible licenses by Instagram and so on will be gone. Because that will have to react once we actually understand the value of our privacy. And so, even Slack, really being a really nice structured way explaining what actually will happen to your data. So instead of having these blocks of walls, legalese, in small font size that doesn't really help anybody, you can structure it. You can explain it. You can structure it in a way that it's actually more comprehensible with bullet points. You can provide summaries, like explaining this is what happened. This is like this block of legalese. This is kind of translated to human terms. can even be so kind as, Tumblr is. Or even introduce some sort of FAQ or so. And these summaries can be very, very nice and helpful, right? This is all fine. I mean, this is great. You have a license, of course you do. Privacy policy, of course you do. But you can actually make it understandable. This is what it's all about. Oh, sorry. If anybody wants chocolate now? No, I'm sorry. But I think it's very important. This stuff is really important to me. So I was spending a lot of time researching and talking to people, and it would be very sad for us if all the stuff that we're designing today will be totally irrelevant for the next generation, like in 10 or 15 years, because they don't trust the web. It'll be very, very sad. It would really, I mean, for me, it would be very sad. Now, sorry. Oh, okay, that was very down. Okay. Where? I can't hear you. I can hear you, but I can't see you. Oh. Oh. Okay. Oh, almost. Okay, just, I'm almost done. I really am. So I can throw a bit more. I just want to finish up. And ready to finish up here. I want to show one video, actually two, but just one. Because I think it's very important. So we spend a lot of time thinking about pixels. But I think that pixels sometimes are really not so important. So I would love to see more applications like this showing up. And this is where it really is not so important how beautiful the interface is.
You might wonder how blind people deal with everyday challenges. Well, normally the answer is simple. We're not that different from you. We play music. We go to school. We go to work. You get the picture. But sometimes the simplest things can be difficult, and we need a pair of eyes.
Connect to.
That's where you come in.
Establishing video connection.
Through your smartphone, Be My Eyes connects the blind with sighted people through a live video connection. Simply choose if you need help or want to help by the click of a button.
That's a nice picture of you and your family, Caroline. Is it well present? Yes, it's a photo from my parents.
You can help just by installing the Be My Eyes app. And we'll notify you when someone needs your help. And if you're in the middle of something, don't worry. Someone else will step in. So, would you care to be my eyes?
So the position and the color of the button doesn't matter here, right? And so because this is really something that really helps people and really matters. So it was a big downer, so I do have to show this video as well. This is just a story of my life, and it's really only 50 seconds. So everything I showed, it's all about making things a bit better, but you will never make them perfect, and that's fine. And this is the story of my life. For designers. Oh. Thanks to Pearl Studio for the video, and I have cats, and now thank you. You know what?
This guy has only one problem, you can stop him. But the good news that those people who will go with us to Berlin will spend 1 week with him. So he's unstoppable, but it will be enough to
I also
spend
have stickers, by the way. So I'm just going to put stickers in here. No. So I'm just going to put them in here. But please be respectful, don't take too many. I don't have that many.
Okay. He has two problems.